conversation. It's the conversation. Y'all ready? Let's go. No filter, no restrictions. You about to give my opinion in its purest form. So my words, don't try to spin them. What I said is what I said. And what I said, I meant it. The gloves are off now when I'm coming out swinging. So engage in verbal combat, but you better be ready. Cause this here for me is light work, even if the topic's heavy. I'm ready for it all with no running from nothing. You just take the time to digest what I put in, no rushing. But time is moving, don't waste it. You want the real, come and face it. Come sit and talk to me if you want it straight without a chaser. And it might burn a little when you step on up to taste it. But it's nothing harsh, I promise. Just a little conversation.
All right, everybody. Oh, why am I so tiny up here in this corner? Jeez.
I don't know.
Let's make me a little bigger, okay?
I just keep saying we've gone from blazers to t-shirts, and I've got my Kill Bill jacket
Yeah,
on.
you got your little Bruce Lee going
Uma
on.
Thurman wore it better, but
As long as you don't have any swords, we're good.
Uma
No
Thurman
swords.
was-
Did Uma Thurman
Uma
wear
Thurman
it better,
wears
or did
everything
Bruce
for
Lee
the
wear
woman.
it better? Did-
Wow.
Did Uma Thurman wear it better, or did Bruce Lee wear it better?
Wow.
Probably Bruce Lee. I mean, if we're talking about the jacket, did Bruce Lee wear? Is that where the Kill Bill
Yeah.
thing came from? I never knew.
Yeah. Everything you see
All
is,
right.
that's where that iconic.
It's funnier if I say I'm wearing the Uma Thurman. If I say I'm wearing something that Bruce Lee wore, well, now I'm posing. Now I'm totally posing.
This is
true.
true.
Otherwise I'm being kind of like, I don't mind comparing myself to a woman. Look at me. I'm old. I'm not an ass. That's, okay.
Okay, awesome. We got two topics today. One involving Putin and the ever-going troubles in Ukraine, and then we're also talking about, because we have, of course, Harold here. We're talking about Florida and basically an educational conversation that we started a while ago. Here's a comment from an article by Politico. Florida school choice programs have been wildly successful. That got cut off under DeSantis. Now public schools might close. So DeSantis has gone on the winning round tour, or however you call it, taking pictures in these schools, signing autographs, thumbs up. You know the things we do in politics when we want to make it look, kissing babies, all of that, because charter schools and private schools are flourishing more than they ever have. They call them choice programs, right? Harold, am I right or wrong? Is that what they're called? Choice programs.
It's branded as choice when it's really just charter. I mean, you had a choice before.
Yeah.
So I don't know what was different, with rebranding this new form of quote unquote an educational construct as choice. But it is what it is.
And so you have a lot of support because you have a lot of parents and families out there going, yes, charter and private school is the way to go. Our public school system sucks. And they're doing all these rallies. I'm like, if you guys spend as much energy damning public schools, if you spent the same energy helping public schools or trying to promote the things that could help public schools, that could probably be a better use of your energy. But public schools are hurting. And this is one of the reasons why. I haven't lived in Florida in a while. I don't understand why this is happening or why we're touting this as a victory if public schools are starting to hurt and charter schools and private schools are taking off.
Well, first, let's go back historically. 2002 is when I think Jeb Bush became our governor.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, not long after that is when, around the time we started pushing No Child Left Behind. I'm sorry, I had a call coming. This whole initiative with choice began to kind of gain a little steam because that's when he wanted to basically outsource education. Now, if Republicans have been in control of education since 2002, that's more than 2 decades, and people are complaining about the condition of it, then why aren't they blaming those who have really destroyed it? so that those that want to, so that they could outsource it for their own political gain as well as profitability. So that's the challenge that we have now, is people aren't paying attention to why we are where we are as it relates to education in Florida and what brought us here or what got us here. And all DeSantis has done is really push the narrative of getting vouchers, which was really the ultimate goal back from the 50s, from public schools, taking those dollars and putting them into private schools. But charter schools, if you ask me, that's that shiny object in the corner that everybody's looking at, when really the goal was to push the monies into to private schools.
So charter school isn't the goal; it's private school. It's just a means to an end. Is that?
The goal is to weaken, but here's my understanding. Right now, charter schools educate about between 10 to 20% of students. So if you're destroying the system that's educating 80+% of your students, does that make sense? And how is that a victory? So you're saying I'm going to destroy that vehicle that's, carting all or the majority of the students in Florida. I'm going to destroy that thing, so it'll become weaker. And then we end up what? Supporting charter schools, which first of all don't have the bandwidth or the capacity to now educate 100% of Florida students. So we can't make it make sense. We can't make it up, but I wouldn't consider it a victory. I would consider it just basically him trying to feed into those individuals who are padding his pockets or padding the pockets of his political campaign as well as constituents.
Most charter schools I've seen are actually smaller in size. So Dave, do you have any questions or comments to what we've talked about already?
In looking at this narrative that they're pushing, that charter schools are thriving. Well, what's their metric for thriving? It seems to me that people are going to it, and by that metric, public schools have been doing great, right? 80% of the kids go to public school. So, or the thing is, it's not a question of, great, people are going to these schools for various reasons. Are they actually doing a better job, right? This is not part of this. So the whole narrative of charter schools thriving could be misleading, right? Because thriving just means attended, not educating better than public schools. And there's a good reason to doubt whether or not these schools will do a good job.
Well, and there is anecdotal evidence of where students have left charter schools and gone back to public schools after those schools have closed, and found out that they were actually behind, academically. So we can say all of these things. We can, whatever articles are out there, and people can produce whatever numbers they want. But when you go back to the actual data, you'll find that there isn't. And not only that, but if you're getting parents who feel their children are brighter and smarter to go to charter schools, you don't have to really do much teaching. And in most cases, they operate by a different set of rules than your public schools. So right now we have in Florida a 3-tier education system where you got public school guidelines, you got charter school guidelines, and you got private school guidelines. And they're all not the same. So it's difficult to even compare them.
No, they're not. And the amount of charter schools that don't exist, if private schools are failing and closing, you're going to have to build more charter schools, which means that's going to cost more money. It's being touted as this is great. In my mind, it just looks like a mess about to happen. Because again, like you said, 80% of students go where?
Right. And over the last 10 years, I think it was when I read this particular article, a different article, over the last 10 years, you had 42% of charter schools in the state of Florida closed. Now, they're not publishing that statistic. They're not promoting that statistic, but that's what, the information gathers. And so it's a matter of people doing the research to see really, is it as successful as what's being proclaimed? Now, what's really at the end of it, in my opinion, is if I could force enough of these public schools to close, then the state will say, now you have to give that land to this charter school company. And now that charter school company will have those resources, those assets
Mhm.
to build their infrastructure on. And not only that, increase the value of what they're currently operating, which is concerning. Because again, those are
Mhm.
taxpayer paid facilities
Yeah.
and or funded facilities. And this is where the governor is really heading with this whole initiative of trying to shut down public schools for a private beneficiary, being
I
charter
One of
programs
the
or
things I
charter.
saw hurting the charter school up here when I was responsible for my nephew, he went to the charter school because it was next to my apartment, which was very convenient. He could walk across the street, right? They have middle school and high school at that charter school. But when he finished middle school, he didn't want to stay because almost all of his friends were going to the public high schools to be with their friends. So we saw a significant drop in their student population from middle to high school. Not a lot of them were staying at that school for high school. So I saw that and I'm like, well, what's the point of having high school if they were losing like 40% of their students to go to the public high schools that all their other friends were going to?
Well,
Um,
we have a similar challenge here where I've been approached by a couple of private schools, and I've even gone to try to address some issues through the NAACP at a couple of at some private schools as well, with regards to, well, won't get into those issues, but what I then began to converse with the headmaster or master of schools or whatever they call that particular individual is, what are your demographics at the elementary level, middle school level, and high school level? And most of them at the lower levels, you may have had less than 5% of students that were Black. But then when you got to the high school level, it went up to the 20, maybe 30% level because they're bringing in Black students to participate in their sports programs, not so much an education agenda behind that. And my challenge to them was, make your lower grade levels just as diverse as your upper grade levels. Why aren't you helping develop
oh,
student
Harold,
athletes? I'm
stop it.
sorry, my
Stop
bad.
it. Dave will tell you this. If colleges can do it, why can't they? Universities have been able to do it for 50 years now, and you're going to get on these high schools about doing it?
Listen, no, these are schools that are elementary through high school, but you want your lower grades to be what they are, and
They,
and then you're worried about getting trophies at the high school level.
they didn't start letting football players go to the University of Alabama because they wanted to educate them.
Hey, I hear you. But you got to challenge, you got to challenge people because again, you want to make sure, are you there really for the best? Because that child can be injured tomorrow. And now what? You're going to revoke that scholarship and send them on their merry way. Whereas we see that happening also in college sports as well.
Well,
Where once the athletes get injured,
mhm.
a lot of times, depending upon the injury, they lose their scholarships.
I'm going to ask Dave this because it's going to bring it to North Carolina. Because in the article, what it was saying, of course, because when one thing seems to work, quote unquote, in one area, people tend to duplicate it. So in the article, they were talking about a lot of GOP led states trying to take this model and implement this model. And Dave, what dangers do you see with that if it was the way we did it in North Carolina?
Well, I think the real dangers are in all of this. Are why are people choosing, and what are you're offering choice, and in all cases, the problem with vouchers is you give vouchers to people who are already sending their kids to private schools. It's an income transfer to people who tend to be predominantly white, and you're basically uh, for conservatives who have a constituency who homeschools more, who pulls people out because they don't like the social issues involved, not the educational issues necessarily. And for conservatives, this is great because They can people who are already out are going to get this money, and that has always been the problem with the voucher program. Is you're going to pay people who are already attending schools, right? The voucher programs that, and so before you change the educational status of one student in your state, millions, perhaps billions, go out out the door. Um, then the question is, what are the qualifications of these charter schools? Are they really good? And to a certain extent, what is the problem that parents are trying to solve when they make this choice? If it is, hey, my student is too smart for your school, and that has often been, something that's happened, that's different. If it's, oh, I don't want my my children to be taught all these woke values, then you're responding to what is largely an imaginary problem, right? They and so it's
Well,
not
hold
just
on.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Because you just said a phrase there that did upset, because we've said that before about some political issues, and the people who do not understand that it's an imaginary problem. We've
Right.
talked about imaginary problems before on here, such as political noise and things like that. And that's the biggest danger I see in all. Sorry, I just wanted to point out that
And
key phrase that you just said there. Continue.
and why do I say it's an imaginary problem? I mean, it, the whole because they're bringing up imaginary problems. Now there are some people who, and I get this. I've heard it from people who they do feel that the diversity in some of the agenda of Black History Month of
Mhm.
diversity makes their children feel guilty for being white. And to them, it's not imaginary. They're like, my kids come back from school and they have these things. That's not imaginary, right? That may be a problem that can be managed. But what I'm saying is when the uh, politicians build on that sentiment by talking about critical race theory,
Mhm.
by passing these anti-diversity things, and in my own state where I teach, we have this thing that very similar to what Florida passed. All these things you're not allowed to do in class, and I looked at this list of things, and I just looked at it and I said, I would never ever say or do any of these things. I'm you might say I'm fair. You might I could be criticized for being woke, but I'm never going to make someone feel guilty for what their ancestors did.
Well, I'm going
Right.
to tell you this from what you just said, because I've had Caucasian friends of mine tell me this. That whole guilt thing is not even the kids, it's the parents. He's like, my kid comes home when they were young for Black History Month, and their questions were, why did we do this? Why did that? And I sat down and explained the history to him. But it's the parent that's going, oh my God, why is my kid learning this stuff? Now I have to explain it. The guilt is not coming from the kids, it's coming from the parent, especially the ones that don't want to explain. Like Dave, I can imagine if your kids came home from Black History Month and they go, "Why did this happen? Why did this happen? Why did this happen?" You're the type of person that's going to sit down and explain. Prime example: I was in a restaurant. It was when ESPN was doing the OJ special, and there was a white guy and his daughter sitting across from me eating a hamburger, and it was on the TV. So she said, "Dad, why is everybody celebrating if you think he killed the woman?" And he said, well, this is what happened. I believe that OJ killed his wife, but when you have a group of people who have gotten the raw end of the stick in court per Rodney King, and he started breaking that down, then this was seen as a victory. Finally, someone got a victory. So it wasn't the fact that everybody that was cheering believed OJ was innocent. It was like, finally, someone got over, right? And so he's sitting there. He explained it a little more eloquently. I just don't have the time. But I'm just listening to him explain that. And I'm like, that's a parent explaining to his child instead of saying, oh my God, we're indoctrinating my daughter to hear this nonsense and yada, yada, yada.
You fell off the earth there for a second.
said OJ 3 times and my computer collapsed. That might be a new urban legend. Don't say OJ 3 times.
But
Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice.
by the way, I'm getting all sorts of low bandwidth warnings, so expect the unexpected from my feed. Just a warning here. I am in Maine, in the woods here, and Starlink. I'm using Starlink, and sometimes it's
Mhm.
good. Other times when it switches satellites,
Not so much, right?
I guess my point though is that I look at these rules that were passed that I can be fired if I don't follow them. And I looked at them and I'm like, I have no problem. I would never say any of this stuff. I would never put that in my class. But what bothered me was who thinks that I would, or the implication that there are people out there who are, I would consider bat spit crazy, right? If they're saying all this crap that you're not allowed to say. And I don't know any of those people, and I've never experienced that. And so that's the imaginary problem, right? And by having this agenda and saying all these faculty members are doing, these teachers are indoctrinating their children, you're creating, that's the imaginary problem that might be driving people to take advantage of this choice, and they will be choosing to move their children away from something that isn't a problem, right? And into a situation where the track record of these charter schools, it's going to be hard for parents to know, are they in fact getting their kids into a better case? And so I don't necessarily have a problem with the choice of vouchers, except for that problem I said earlier, except it's the context of what they're doing adjacent to it that I think is going to uh, lead a lot of people to do things that they otherwise wouldn't do.
Well,
You,
one of my challenges, and even with what you've said to add to it, you have at least one private school that we know of that's been in the news cycle. I think it was in St. Petersburg, that once they approved those vouchers to be, charter schools to be eligible, I mean, private schools to be eligible for vouchers, that private school doubled its tuition. Its tuition was
Oh yeah.
$12,000 a year. They get an $8,500 voucher. They decide double my tuition. I'll get the 8,500 plus. Now I'm making even more because I've got now on the plus side another 25% increase in the cost of attending now this particular institution. And so now this is where greed kicks in. And I was on a TikTok live earlier today, and the dude had an issue with um, the fact that uh, Biden was trying to pay off student debt. I'm like, well, listen, these things are going out of control. These things are starting to leave being less encouraging for people to try to get an advanced degree or some type of education because of it. And now with charter schools, or not charter schools, but with vouchers coming into play, our education now at the K-12 level is going to be somewhat of a challenge due to the fact that now this money grab that's taking place is, we don't know how long it's going to go on for, and we don't even know, we haven't even challenged it legally to see, hey, listen, can they do this? But right now it's being done, and our governor in Florida is now moving on another level, even through the article that we read earlier, where up to 42 campuses may be closed in Broward County. And there's going to be an attempt, as I said earlier, for a land grab. And how do the taxpayers feel about monies that have been expended to build schools in their respective communities, public schools, them being now owned and managed by charter school companies? And then what happens if that charter school company decides, well, we're not making enough money here, I don't have enough students, therefore we're going to now sell the land to another developer and rake in all of those benefits as well. So there's a number of issues. Is it all about education? I would say no, it's all about money, whether it's being outsourced or in-housed.
you touched a sore spot before. We're about to pivot here to our second topic, but back in 2017, when I was given a 100% rating from the VA, I went through this program to forgive my student loans because if you're 100% veteran disabled, they have this program for you. Did all the paperwork, did everything, talked to everybody I need to talk to, and the loans were forgiven. That was 2016, actually. Well, 2 weeks ago, I get a call from, I'll say the name, Nelnet, saying, hey, you owe $16,000 in student loans. I'm like, hey, I dealt with that already. I haven't heard from you guys in 7 years. Why are you coming out of the blue saying I owe $16,000? They're like, well, it just came on my desk. I'm like, well, where has it been for 6 years? So now I'm going back and forth and fighting with them over that. So that's a sore spot with me right now, student loans. But let's
Right.
talk about Dave's best friend,
Uh-oh.
Vladimir Putin. Okay. Uh, so, uh, it's been said that he has offered peace settlement. Let's get into that, Dave. Go ahead.
All right. It well, first of all, the reporting on this from Reuters is that aides have of him say he wants to make this peace proposal. And so as you're trying to read the tea leaves here, um, it's probably it could be the case that this is coming out as starting to put the peace feelers out. And so there is increased reporting that he is now open to negotiating on the basis of the current status on the ground, right? Stopping where he is and having his gains recognized. And there are a couple things about this. One is this true? Is he really doing it? He has not come out and made a proposal, and that's one thing. And I think that the other thing is the value, the merits of this proposal, and uh, they break down in a couple ways. First of all, I think he is at a point where he would be smart to start trying to figure out how to get out of this or how to stop this. If he could get the deal that he's asking for, that would be a huge victory for him because he has gained ground. He has got, his land bridge. He has annexed the breakaway republics of Luhansk and Donetsk. In addition, he had previously annexed Crimea. And now he has a land bridge to it. And he would love to stop here. He would love to have the West recognize that. The problem from the West point of view on the merits of that is hell no, because that would be validating uh, uh, the technical term is aggression, right? When you use armed force to take over territory from another country in international law, that's aggression. That was out, that in the 19th century, that was, it must be Tuesday, that was normal business. At the end of World War II with the UN, the one of the founding principles, we're going to stop that. That's not going to happen anymore. So to acknowledge, to give him what he wants would be to violate a fundamental principle of the international legal system and the world security order since World War II, which most people don't know about, right? It's kind of an abstraction, which is going to be a problem, but it's also for the policymakers, it's a huge point. However, if you look at his strategic situation right now, uh, he had his moment when Ukraine was starved for rounds, and he was able to make marginal gains. But his gains were really just that; they were marginal. He's taking a village. He took Avdiivka. Wow. I mean, Bakhmut was a much bigger city. Avdiivka was more of a town or village, and so his gains were actually very small. So there's probably not a scenario where he could credibly expect, hey, we can go, we can do it, we can get major gains on the ground, we can actually denazify, right? Which is bullshit. There's no Nazis, but that's what he says. So he's probably, there really isn't an upside to continuing the war. Now that Ukraine's getting all this weaponry from the US and they got a big thing, I think he sees that as a problem. I also look at it and say, hey, look, when you were making those gains, every time you made a gain, pressed Ukraine.
Uh-oh. Hold on. Give Dave a second. He's doing the. That's a good way for him to freeze, isn't it, Harold? That's a, he looks. That's probably the maddest I've ever seen him. He looks irate, even though he's not. Oh, it's so good. I don't even want to take it off the screen. Oh, it's gone.
You're wrong for that.
No, it's wrong.
Back.
There we
Did you
go.
lose me?
No, it was just the way you froze. You looked like that could have been a thumbnail. You were like, you looked like
I
you were
kept
ready.
talking because, I'm having one of these Starlink moments. And you guys thought, so I kept talking like, I don't know if this is working or not, but just to go, look,
But
the
you
key
you
thing is
you stopped
Putin
on the
would make,
gains.
Putin would make little gains. And every time he made a gain, the Europeans upped their participation, right? They started giving more money, more weapons. Denmark gave all of its artillery ammunition, which was about half a day of ammo for these guys. But they don't. Denmark had like 1 battalion of artillery, so they didn't have a lot of
Oh
artillery
my god!
ammunition. Uh,
I can't.
uh,
That
not on
half
the
a day.
scale that it's being used. But then France starts talking about deploying troops, right? And oh, by the way, that talk, even though it got poo-pooed, it keeps going. And they just approved having French military trainers come into Ukraine, right? So
All it
the
takes is for
advisors
one
are
country
coming
to
in.
start. All it takes is for one country to start sending troops, and then
And so my thing is strategically, Putin, every time he made gains, they were so minor, or anytime he made a gain that actually wasn't minor, that actually threatened Ukraine, it was so slow and had there was no building, no momentum gaining, so that NATO could respond. The democracies of the world could go, oh my God, we need to do something, talk amongst themselves for a week or two, and then consult with themselves for another week or two, and then respond, and nothing had changed on the ground, right? See, my point is that he's not. Someone said, "Oh, so you're saying whenever he starts winning, he's actually losing?" Um, it's like, well, he's winning so slow that he's not getting in the decision cycle of NATO, and so NATO just keeps expanding its game, right? And saying, "Oh, we're going to give you more," and so he's got to recognize that. So from his point of view, there's really, I don't think anything to be gained from continuing the war, except as now part of if he can get a negotiated outcome, right? That he's not going to gain his objectives through military force. So now he has to try to gain them somehow through negotiation. And but we'll see what happens. But whether or not any real peace proposal comes out. But people, by the way, when I put this on TikTok, people are like, "Oh, the West is keeping Ukraine from negotiating," which is a Russian talking point, by the way. And it's amazing how many commenters on TikTok echo the Russian talking points. But and a lot of them are just people, but they get it fed to them and they feed it back to you. The idea that the U.S. and Europe are holding Ukraine back. Ukraine's chomping at the bit not to negotiate. They're chomping at the bit to kick these guys out of Crimea and so uh, I'm like, the idea that the West is keeping Ukraine from engaging in negotiations is just laughable. But some people are believing, and that's definitely the Kremlin narrative.
to simplify that. That's me randomly moving into Harold's house when he's not home, and then when he says you got to get out, I said, well, let's negotiate. Let's negotiate me leaving. Harold, do you have a comment or a question?
No, I mean it's I'm learning. I've always learned a lot when Dave talked about those European pieces because again, that's not my forte. I kind of watch and look at it from a broader scale, but hear the minor details and the nuances that he explains. But it also helps me understand what happened when he moved into what was the other former Soviet country
Moldova?
that during the Obama administration.
Oh, Crimea.
Crimea, yeah, I was thinking Crimea, but I wasn't sure if I'd be correct, so I didn't say
Yeah.
it. But when he moved in there, as he's moving in and he's moving in and he's moving in, we're saying stop, stop, stop. But he's saying, okay, after I get this, okay, after I get this, and kind of continuing his progress until he fully annexed that particular entity. But, you know, what do we do, or what would you say would be the best course of action from the international community to kind of deter him? Because right now, he seems to not be interested in following anyone's orders, similar to what we have going on, unfortunately, in Israel and in Gaza and what's in Rafah. So where, we're hitting innocent, a lot of innocent people are being hit. And unfortunately, there's an apology. And then after the apology, you hear about two more camps being hit. And I'm saying to myself, well, wait a minute, what are we doing? And how are we going to stop innocent people from being the targets? And we can say all day, there was two, for example, Hamas soldiers or whatever were in those particular camps, or that camp that was initially targeted. But how can we confirm that as an international community to make sure that what Netanyahu is stating to us is actually factual? And I'm starting to almost put him in a Putin place, not quite yet, but I'm almost putting him there because of his actions. And it seems like there is no stopping him, and he's unwilling to listen to anyone.
Well, I think one thing that worries me about having these two things go on at the same time is, in the case of Ukraine, there will be a lot of people who are push for peace, right? Because you've got to stop the fighting, you've got to stop the fighting. But in this case, it's Russia, is going in. The fighting is military on military. There are casualties, but they're able to pull the people out, and they're fighting over uh, the things that are going on there are moving towards an end of whether Ukraine is independent or not. When we look at Rafah or at Gaza, the violence there there's more of an argument to push for peace as an end in and of itself, right? That look, I don't care what the outcome is, you're killing so many people right now that anything that gets that to stop for a day or more would be really great. And not to say it's absolute, but that the value of peace in and of itself is much higher in, I think, in the Gaza situation than it is uh, in Ukraine,
Right.
where there's still the outcome that's trying to be determined. And so the original question was, what should Europe do? Right? You started out asking what I
Right.
was thinking Europe should do. They're actually, I think, doing exactly that. What they should be doing.
It's always at the perfect, and he always and he always has the perfect frozen moment. I just,
So, because again, what is the deterrent for Russia? What is going to get Putin? And we realize that, yes, he's a vile dictator and all these things, and he really doesn't care. He has nothing to lose, in that process. There
that
you
was,
go.
that
Here,
was
I'm
even,
back. This is why I haven't done this from Maine before. I thought Starlink would do a better job. I guess my point is that the Europeans are doing this escalation thing, slowly, measured, and that in terms of now you're dealing with Putin. You're trying to get Putin to come to the negotiating table or to act. And so by saying to him, "Look, things are going to get worse in the future," that's how you encourage him to stop. And I mentioned the French military trainers going in. They are now lobbying in the EU to have everyone pull all those restrictions they put on Ukraine using its weapons in Russia, pull them out. Now, that sounds very violent, and people who value peace above everything would say, oh, you're making the war worse. If you look at it as a strategic interaction, it's like, no, we are taking the gloves off telling Putin it's going to get worse for you, maybe you should negotiate. And so it's got a strategic instrumental value, and that is what they're doing, and that makes a lot of sense. By the way, the F-16s are about to make their debut. Anytime, any week now, we might see them used. And the Ukrainians have been very methodically blowing the crap out of Russian air defense, which doesn't defend the air very well at all. And there have been some spectacular strikes on Russian air bases, Russian air defense. That all looks to me like preparatory work before you start flying your F-15s around to blow the snot out of things on the ground. And that's coming. And so all of that is, at least theoretically, the kind of thing that moves Putin to negotiating, right? And maybe we've seen the first evidence of that. In Israel, in Gaza, I mean, this is just a mess. And there's, it's everything Harold said is true. What do we know? We don't know. We aren't sure what's happening. But it's you're you know they are doing things the United States would never do, right? In terms of their use of military force, we would never do it. We would never tolerate our military leaders to do it or our political leaders to do it. And if that, but if saying that then anti-Semitic, right? Saying that is getting this huge political backlash that really complicates things there that I don't even want to talk about it. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I mean, my understanding of anti-Semitism is not so much voicing your disagreement with the country of Israel, but saying something that may appear to be threatening to the Jewish community.
Well,
That
well,
I mean, that's just. Go ahead.
we know that's what it is. But it's like these things that we always talk about. That's the narrative. That's the thing that people believe. If you mention anything involving Israel and not in a positive light, then you're being anti-Semitic. Um, and that's almost like saying because you mention a black person, you're being racist. You know,
Well, even if people mention about, protecting the people of Palestine or freeing the people of Palestine from whatever level of oppression, well, Palestinians are a Semitic group. So, I mean, if they're Semitic, how saying free one Semitic group from another Semitic group is it anti-Semitic? It creates a real crazy, I guess, circular argument almost, trying to get an answer or get an understanding.
And although I think in our language the usage is, yes, technically they are Semitic. We tend to, I think, are referring to Jews in that when we mean that.
Correct.
And so, but you're right. It's come from that space. And it's interesting. The people that study hate groups will say that normally equating Israel with, all Jewish people with Israel, making that equation of Israel to the entire Jewish population is itself part of a racist, right wing thing. And they were like, look, normally that's the kind of thing we think a hate group would do, right? Is associate everyone with Israel. Because again, it's associate a group of individuals and generalize about them based off of some data point, whether it be an individual or a thing. And so, the thing that always bothers me is Netanyahu barely wins elections, right? And I think Harold was very right in the way he said it. Blame Netanyahu, criticize Netanyahu. He's the decision maker, right? And you're blaming an individual and not the state of Israel, because again, states don't really make decisions, individuals do. And so I felt that was the right way to go about it, definitely, to say it's not Israel, much less Jews in general. It's Netanyahu and his government making these decisions. And I think that's the right way to look at it, although you'll still get backlash.
Yeah.
yeah.
Potentially, you could potentially,
Well,
you know.
you've already seen from when we did our social media episode, we're gonna get backlash no matter, uh, you know, what we're doing, right? So,
At least we didn't do a bad performance at the Lion King.
oh,
I don't know what happened there. Okay,
I
I'm
was,
not in
I
that
was, I
conversation.
had to take my dog to the vet last night. Emergency. Lizzie found a porcupine, and so at 10 o'clock,
Oh, ouch!
I'm rushing down to Lewiston, Maine, where the all-night vet clinic is, and I'm waiting there, and I realized that the wait time was being denoted by how many videos on TikTok I saw about it, and I got over 20. I mean, it was just like, wow, there's just
Wow,
everyone is piling on this thing. That is backlash. That is the most epic backlash I've ever seen.
that's funny. So
I
she
don't.
found the porcupine.
Harrison Butker didn't get that much backlash.
Funny. Yeah. But no, as we look at these skirmishes, and every week that I
Yeah.
talk on the radio, I often send prayers to those people that are impacted, those families that are impacted, because at the end of the day, there's so many innocent victims that are out here, that are suffering, from all of these international. I want to say skirmishes because I don't know if we want to call them full-fledged wars. Because when I think of war, I'm thinking, you know, uh, two sides actually fighting each other versus one small contingent within, a group uh, instigating or initiating a particular skirmish. But nonetheless, as we move forward, I will keep my ear to the ground and to the floor to see, what I can hear and learn with respect to this. And the more important thing is, what do we do? How can we help? What would be a next step to those who are empathetic towards those impacted in these particular situations? Or is there anything we can do in support of the communities that are impacted adversely?
I wanted to end, but I didn't get the imagery uploaded because we have a new segment we're going to do on the show. Because we already have Dave's Ukraine update, which you've already got. But we have a segment, it's really good imagery, but I can't find it, called What the Hell Are They Talking About? That's a new segment that's going to be on here. And what it's going to do, it's going to show social media posts. But the social media post was when, Carol, you were talking about Disney, the downfall of uh, Disney and Florida relations. And
Mm.
MC Velaseca said, hospitality lives and dies on immigrants' backs. That added to construction and agriculture is going to be disastrous. And C. Steva said, immigrants can't afford to live in Florida. Um, but that wasn't the comment I'm getting to. I was just going down. And Lazo says, not true. We do not need Disney in Florida. So
What?
someone said, and why not? But you do.
What?
And then someone said, please break down why we don't need Disney in Florida. And the person is like, stop being sheep. You don't need Disney in Florida. So that was a response to your Disney in Florida situation. This guy says clearly, we don't need Disney in Florida. What the hell
Okay.
are you talking
Well,
about?
just hopefully we can remind him that if Disney leaves, guess what happens? We become Mississippi. I'll
Yeah.
just put it there.
Well, this is what I tell people about Florida. First of all, we've let two Texas Texans be governor. That's part of the problem. But South Florida will be okay. It's the rest of Florida that's going to suffer the most from the absence of Disney. Because people are still coming to Miami and Key West. South Florida will be
Right.
fine. It's the rest of the state of Florida that's going to be hurting.
I don't even think South Florida will be fine. I mean, aside from, well, I think you have a point with cruises and with Key West, but even Key West is not going to be able to sustain Florida's economy. You
No,
rip Disney out of Florida, Florida's pretty much done.
yeah, people underestimate what Disney means to Florida.
Yeah, and it will be a deeply entrenched red state that's going to be one of the poorest.
Well,
If Disney ever leaves.
Maybe we can get on the phone, me and Dave, and get Disney to come to North Carolina. Maybe that's what we'll do.
That'll
I
work.
don't know. That's an interesting idea.
I'll move.
The thing too is, I would say, I mean, technically, the people who say, well, you don't need Disney, it's like, yeah, Florida's not going to collapse, right? I mean, no state actually collapses. I mean, West Virginia's still there, right? It has shrunk dramatically. But no, I mean, West Virginia is the state that has, I mean, no hate on West Virginia, but they're coal. That was what they did. And
It's also not a place when you go, hey, let's go somewhere. It's not the first state on your mind to travel.
right, but it's still there, but it's not doing well. And I
Yeah,
think Florida's problem is, Disney normally, normal times, maybe Disney wouldn't be the straw that broke the camel's back, except for all the other straws and big frickin' logs that have been put on top of the camel. Um, just, the number of people moving in and out of Florida, those numbers keep getting similar, right? The number of people leaving Florida is, I think last I heard, it's like 700,000 in, 500,000 out, right? So those numbers are getting closer and closer. The insurance, the big fact for Florida is the change in the disaster and flood insurance, right? That you can no longer get, that Florida is no longer being subsidized by the rest of the country. Insurance rates are going out of control, and I don't think it's stopped. I don't think that crisis has really gotten there. And so the point is that I think Florida is getting closer and closer to starting to lose people. And if Disney went, that could, that would be just even worse. And so I think it's going to be heading into a declining state mode in the next decade,
if left,
no
you would,
matter what.
if Disney left, Florida would definitely have to consider being a state that has state taxes. Because,
How many hurricanes can you guys take this year?
none.
None.
And you're going to get them. You're going to get
Yeah.
more than usual because climate change is real. And even if you don't believe in it, the hurricane going to show up.
Well,
You know,
we,
I
we, we
mean,
can't say climate change in Florida. We can't say climate change in Florida. So
What do you
right, but
it's the law.
and again,
I might
you're
get banned.
What do you say in Florida if you can't say climate change?
You got to ask the governor. He just said, you can't say he signed a bill saying you can't say climate change.
What is that free speech?
well, no, you can't use it in planning your energy. And I
God.
mean, there's
Hey, I think the best line from today is you don't have to believe in climate change, but the hurricane's gonna come anyway.
Yeah,
the
it'll be here anyway.
hurricane believes in it, believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
and
Hurricane.
I think the year where there are three, because there were two last year, right?
Hmm.
The year where there are three or four is gonna be, you know really bad. I mean, that's gonna be when you really, I think it's gonna come, because there's no way that these insurance companies are gonna pay off all this stuff.
Yeah,
And
yeah, they don't need to. You just pay
Well,
all this insured for years and years. They don't need to do that. They don't
no,
have.
no. What's going to eventually have to happen is the state's going to have to be self-insured, because you even have banks now that refuse to borrow. Florida banks don't even write mortgages for Floridians.
yeah,
So
and
people are
it
moving out of Florida because of fraud and other foolishness. But this is where we are. So now you take Disney and move Disney out of here. I don't know people in the international community saying I'm going to Florida to go to the beach. There's
did
nothing
you go to
left.
Universal?
No. Um,
I
Well,
no,
it does not have the same
I
appeal.
was just at Universal. There are a lot of foreign, Universal
no.
is, there is a thing that it could be the case that a Disney leaving could attract another theme park type thing that
Well,
would take advantage. There could be a legacy of Disney that you could keep going, possibly. And that
Universal.
was my thought being at Universal, is like, hey, they built this next to Disney because everything they need to run a theme park is here. And as Universal grows, there could be
Oh,
another one that could grow.
universe,
Well, I
Possibly.
just I
universe.
just know if I'm Disney and I'm leaving, I'm going to blow up all my infrastructure on my way out the door. So
Oh, I'll tell
just,
you what, I enjoyed Disney as a kid, but as an adult, I haven't been to Disney World, and so I've been to Disneyland. I haven't been to Disney World so long. Every time I go to Orlando, I go to Universal Studios. Uh,
yeah,
the,
but most kids, most children, all they know is Mickey Mouse. That's
right.
what you've been told. That's what you see. I mean, Universal doesn't have the TV shows like Disney
I
does.
got you. I was just remembering per Dave's per Steve's comments, like people forget. Oh yeah, Universal Studios does extremely well. Not saying it's not because Disney's not there. I just totally flipped my mind. I was like, oh crap, we do have Universal Studios there, which is when I first went to Universal Studios, what 20 something years ago. It's nowhere near as big and covers as much ground as it does now, and it's just getting bigger and bigger. So, but Disney is the moneymaker. That's the number one seed. Great show. I don't know. You gotta get out of here. Great show today, guys. We'll continue this conversation later. We're going to be ecstatic to see what has transpired in the talks with Russia and Ukraine between now and when we see you 2 weeks from now. So I'm assuming.
Or
Oh,
what
well,
happens in the war.
yeah. Well,
Forget the talks.
listen, we can say
S-16s are coming, baby.
can't say war, we can't say climate change. All right, so there you go. And last thing I wanted to say, I
Don't
saw
say gay.
from some of my friends going, the public school system in Florida is such a terrible situation. That's why I decided to homeschool. And I look at the two people that are my friends that are the parents, and I'm like, you're homeschooling? Good luck, kid. Good luck.